Hey everyone, welcome back. Grab your favorite drink and settle in because Tuesday's episode of The Young and the Restless is bringing pure emotional intensity, family heartbreak, and a massive ray of hope at the very end. We kick things off with Nikki Newman, who is hitting one of the absolute lowest emotional points of her recovery. After Dr. Nolan removed her bandages, Nikki was left completely blind with the doctor confirming her optic nerve needs to heal naturally, and there are no guarantees her sight will ever return. Overwhelmed by the terrifying reality that she might never see again, Nikki suffers another devastating emotional breakdown and a painful emotional outburst. Watching her go through this despair is absolutely gut-wrenching for Victor Newman. Victor stands by Nikki's side through every tear, offering unwavering support, but he feels completely helpless knowing he can't fix her medical condition or take away her pain. Despite feeling powerless, Victor remains totally committed to helping her through, setting the stage for a full reunion once she heals. Meanwhile, a serious family debate is brewing over how to handle Nikki's crisis. Victoria Newman refuses to accept a world where her mother remains blind, stubbornly maintaining hope that her vision will return. On the flip side, Claire Newman fully grasps how serious the situation is and feels frustrated by Victoria's refusal to acknowledge the worst-case scenario, believing the family needs to prepare for permanent vision loss. But hold on to your seats, soap fans, because the entire storyline is about to shift. Just as Nikki reaches peak despair, spoilers hint that she is expected to experience the very first signs of a vision breakthrough before the episode ends, finally shifting her storyline from heartbreak toward a hopeful, complete recovery. What if predictions? What happens next? What if Nikki keeps the breakthrough a secret at first? If she gets the sudden flash of light or shadow, she might hesitate to tell Victor right away out of fear that it's just a false alarm. What if the conflict between Victoria and Claire escalates? Victoria being proven right about Nikki's vision could create lingering tension with Claire, who feels pushed aside for taking a realistic approach. What if Victor plans a grand romantic gesture? Once Nikki's sight is fully restored, Victor might pull out all the stops to give Nikki a dramatic, unforgettable grand reunion. I want to hear from you. Do you side with Victoria's optimism or Claire's practical mindset during a medical crisis? Are you relieved that Nikki's vision is finally starting to show signs of returning? What would you hope to see next for Victor and Nikki once she fully recovers? Tell me all your thoughts and predictions in the comments section below. Thank you so much for hanging out and watching today. If you loved catching up on all the latest way and our drama with me, please hit that like button, drop a comment, share this video with your fellow soap addicts, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an update. See you next time. Sally Spectra has unfinished business back in Los Angeles. That's not my phrase. That's Courtney Hope's own words from late 2025, talking about her own character. And I want to open with that specific quote because it tells you something genuinely rare about where this character currently sits. Most of the people we've profiled on this podcast are locked firmly into one show. One city, one canvas. Sally's the rare exception. She's got 2 soaps worth of unfinished stories sitting behind her, and the actor playing her is the one keeping that door deliberately open. Let's start with Courtney Hope because her own path into daytime is worth understanding before we get into why this crossover situation is so structurally unusual. She was born Courtney Ann Hope on August 15, 1989 in Dallas, Texas. Before her big soap break, she'd already built some visibility through genre and project work, but the material I've got doesn't give me granular detail on every specific early credit, so I'm not going to invent a full pre-soap filmography beyond what's actually confirmed. Her actual breakthrough came when she originated Sally Spectra on The Bold and the Beautiful in 2017, and I want to underline that word originated because it's structurally important for everything that follows in this episode. She wasn't stepping into an already established version of this character, the way Billy Flynn did with Kane Ashby a couple episodes back. She built Sally from the ground up on B&B specifically, helping to find the character fresh for a new generation of viewers. Then in 2020, something happened that's genuinely rare in this entire genre, and I want to spend real time explaining exactly why it's rare, because I don't think we've encountered anything quite like it anywhere else in the series. CBS confirmed her full-time move to The Young and the Restless with Sally arriving in Genoa City seeking a fresh start, and critically, this wasn't a recast. This wasn't a different actor picking up the same character name on a different show the way we've discussed with a couple of other legacy figures in the series. This was the same actor playing the same character, physically relocating from one sister soap to another. I think it's worth sitting with how unusual that actually is. We've talked at length in the series about characters who get recast when they move between shows and characters who leave a soap and return years later played by someone entirely different. Sally's situation is neither of those things. Courtney Hope carried this character across the literal boundary between two separate CBS daytime dramas, keeping full continuity of performance intact the entire way. On awards, she picked up a Daytime Emmy nomination for Outstanding Supporting Actress in a Drama Series in 2021 for her bold and the beautiful work, and then won that same award category in 2024, this time for her young and the restless performance as Sally. I want to flag the shape of that trajectory specifically because it's genuinely elegant as a career arc, nominated for playing this character on one show, and then actually winning for playing the same character on a different show entirely. That's about as clean a piece of evidence as you could ask for that this specific performance and the specific character genuinely translates across different creative environments rather than being tied to the particular writing or tone of just one soap's version of Los Angeles versus Genoa City. Personal life, the material I've got here focuses mostly on her professional comments about Sally rather than detailed private life reporting, and I want to respect that rather than stretch the material into something it isn't. What's clearly confirmed is that she's remained genuinely visibly engaged with the character, and with fans actively discussing Sally's future. Which is worth noting because it tells you this isn't an actor who's simply collecting a paycheck on a long-running role. She's an active, ongoing participant in the public conversation around where this character goes next. No verified net worth figure exists in what I've got, consistent with this entire series, so I won't invent one. As of 2026, Hope remains active on Y&R as Sally Spectra, and her own comments suggest she genuinely sees the character as having real room left to grow, including the possibility of reconnecting with her bold and the beautiful past. That keeps her in a genuinely unique position among everyone we've covered in this series. She's simultaneously a current active Genoa City player and a potential crossover asset the show could activate at essentially any point. All right, let's get into Sally Spectra herself, and I want to take real time here, because I think this character represents a genuinely different structural category than almost everything else we've discussed across this entire series. Character whose identity is explicitly built on two separate soap universes, simultaneously rather than being anchored fully to one. Sally's full fictional name is simply Sally Spectra, and I want to flag something important right away, because it connects to a much older piece of soap opera history that predates Hope's version of the character entirely. The Spectra name itself carries real legacy weight on the bold and the beautiful specifically. This is the family name with deep roots in that show's own mythology tied to the fashion world rivalry with the Forresters that's run through B&B's history for decades. So, when Hope's version of Sally showed up in 2017, she wasn't just a new character with a made-up surname. She was inheriting an entire pre-existing piece of soap opera DNA, a family name that already carried real narrative weight before her specific portrayal ever began. Her occupation in story is fashion designer and businesswoman, and her personality, as established, is bold, creative, ambitious, impulsive, resilient, romantic, and self-inventing. I want to sit on that last trait specifically, self-inventing, because I think it's the single most important descriptor in this entire profile, and it connects directly to both halves of her story, the B&B origin and the Way and Aralan. Sally's not a character defined by a fixed, static identity the way a dynastic heir might be. She's defined by her capacity to remake herself when circumstances demand it, which is exactly what her real-world in-story journey from Los Angeles to Genoa City actually represents at a structural level. The character's core trait and her actual, literal narrative arc are the same thing. The material describes her as a fashion world survivor character, someone who can be written as underdog, schemer, romantic lead, or comic chaos engine, depending entirely on what a given storyline needs from her. I think that flexibility is genuinely valuable and worth naming clearly because it's a different kind of narrative utility than most of the characters we've discussed in this series. She's not locked into one specific function the way, say, Tracy Abbott's built around emotional honesty specifically, or the way Sheila Carter's built around being an unkillable threat. Sally can shift registers entirely depending on what a storyline calls for, while Hope's specific performance, according to the material, keeps her lively without sacrificing real emotional weight or professional credibility, avoiding the trap of making her purely a scheming troublemaker with no depth underneath. Her family and relationship history spans both shows in a genuinely integrated way. The Spectra legacy from B&B sits alongside her newer generosity connections from Y&R, and her romantic history includes a significant relationship with Wyatt Spencer back on B&B, and later major ties to Billy Abbott here on Y&R, and I will flood that connection directly, because we discussed Billy Abbott's own current storyline in real depth a few episodes back, right in the middle of his Sally King Chancellor escalation, and Sally is, of course, the exact same relationship we were discussing from Billy's side of things back then. I think that's worth naming clearly for anyone who's been following this series King continuously. We've now covered this exact relationship from both participants' individual perspectives. Billy's episode focused on his own volatility and self-sabotage patterns, and now we're looking at it from Sally's side, where her role functions as what the material describes as a possible stabilizing force for him, while also creating real conflict whenever his ambitions get in the way. Her character arc, going back to the beginning, first established her as a younger Spectra, carrying a big-name family legacy, along with a lot of genuine hustle and ambition. On Y&R specifically, the character got repositioned as someone actively trying to survive and rebuild. Completely new city, which I think was a genuinely smart structural choice, because it made her more flexible and considerably less tied down to the specific established Los Angeles world of B&B, that repositioning let the show preserve everything that made the character energetic and compelling in the first place, while simultaneously giving Hope a stronger, more sustainable long-term role to build on rather than being permanently anchored to storylines and relationships that belong to a different show's specific canvas. Recent comments from Hope herself suggest Sally still got real unresolved story left to tell, especially because her past in Los Angeles remains, in Hope's own words, emotionally and narratively unfinished. I think the character's genuine staying power comes precisely from her ability to be simultaneously glamorous and vulnerable at the same time, which makes her a strong fit for romance storylines, business conflict storylines, and crucially, genuine crossover possibilities that most other characters in this entire canvas simply don't have available to them as an option. Her in-universe power, structurally, comes from her creativity, her genuine fashion industry credibility, and her demonstrated willingness to start completely over when circumstances demand it. She's explicitly not a dynasty heiress in the way a Newman or an Abbott is, and I think that's actually central to her entire appeal rather than a limitation. She can still punch above her actual social weight in generosity specifically because she's resourceful and, frankly, hard to ignore once she's in a room. That outsider status, arriving in a new city with a recognizable name but no built-in local power base, is a major part of what makes her story compelling. Similar in some structural ways to what we discussed with Kane Ashby's own outsider, insider positioning a couple episodes back. Though Sally's version of that dynamic is rooted specifically in genuine talent and hustle rather than in reinvented business credibility. On wealth, no precise verified net worth for Sally and what I've got, so I won't invent one. Consistent with this entire series, the fair description is professionally successful but not dynasty wealthy. Her status tied more to talent and relationships than to any inherited power or family fortune, which is a meaningfully different financial positioning than most of the characters we've profiled across this whole podcast. Heading through 2025 and into 2026, her presence is defined by professional stability, ongoing romantic tension, specifically through the Billy Abbott relationship, and that lingering B&B connection Hope's kept actively alive in public conversation. Hope's own comments make clear the character still feels genuinely expandable to her, especially if the show ever wants to revisit that Los Angeles history directly, which keeps Sally positioned simultaneously as both the current active Y&R player and a potential crossover surprise the show could activate essentially whenever it chooses to. Let me get into some real analysis now, because I think Sally Spectra raises a genuinely unique structural question compared to everyone else we've covered across this entire series, and it's worth taking real time to work through exactly what makes her situation so different. Here's what I find genuinely compelling about this specific case. Every other character we've discussed across this podcast exists within a single bounded fictional Universe Genua City for most of our Y and R subjects, Los Angels and the Forester World for our B and B subjects, Salem for Xander Kyriakis. Sally's the rare exception to that entire pattern because her actual canonical history spans two different fictional cities and two entirely different shows worth of established relationships, all carried by the same actor without a single gap in continuity. That means her story doesn't just have depth within one canvas, the way we've discussed with most other characters. It has genuine width across two separate canvases simultaneously, and Hope's own public comments suggest that width isn't simply historical trivia sitting in the character's background. It's genuinely active ongoing narrative potential that the show could choose to activate at any point. I think that's actually a genuinely rare and valuable asset for writers' room to have available, and I want to explain exactly why. Most long-running characters, however rich their history, are fundamentally limited to the relationships and conflicts available within their one home canvas. If a show wants fresh story material for, say, Tracy Abbott or Nick Newman, it has to generate that material entirely from within Genua City's existing relationship web. Sally's got an entire show's worth of established relationships and unresolved history sitting available as a completely separate story reservoir, one the writers could draw on whenever they wanted a storyline that genuinely surprises longtime viewers of both shows rather than simply recombining characters who have already interacted extensively within just one canvas. I do want to flag a genuine uncertainty here, though, because I think it's worth being honest about rather than assuming this crossover potential will definitely get used just because it's structurally available. Hope's comments about unfinished business and potential B and B reconnection are, as far as I can tell from what I've got, exactly that. Comments, expressions of genuine ongoing interest from the actor herself, not confirmed scheduled storyline plans from the writer's room. There's a real, meaningful difference between an actor expressing genuine enthusiasm for creative possibility and a network actually greenlighting and scheduling that possibility as upcoming story. I don't have confirmation that any specific crossover is actually planned, and I think it would be irresponsible to imply otherwise just because the idea itself is compelling, and Hope clearly kept the door open in her own public remarks. What I do think is worth naming clearly is how smart it was structurally for the show to reposition Sally around survival and rebuilding once she moved to Genua City, rather than simply importing her entire Los Angels relationship web wholesale into the new setting. That repositioning did two things simultaneously, and I think both matter. First, it gave Hope a genuinely fresh, sustainable long-term role, rather than one permanently defined by relationships and rivalries that belong to a different show's specific storytelling rhythms. And second, critically, it preserved rather than spent the Los Angels material, keeping it available and largely unresolved rather than rushing to tie up every loose end from her B and B history immediately upon her way and the bro arrival. That's exactly the kind of patient, disciplined storytelling choice that keeps a crossover possibility genuinely alive for years rather than burning through it too. I also want to point out something about the specific timing of Hope's unfinished business comments landing in late 2025 right, as we're discussing Sally's current situation, heading into 2026. That timing suggests this isn't simply old stale speculation the actor's been repeating for years, without any real substance behind it. It's a recent ongoing part of the public conversation around this character specifically, which tells me the crossover possibility remains a live current topic, rather than something that's faded into background trivia the way certain long-dormant storyline threads eventually do on long-running shows. Here's my honest verdict, and I'm not going to hedge it. Courtney Hope has accomplished something genuinely rare in this entire genre, originating a character on one major soap, and then successfully carrying that exact same character with full performance continuity, intact across to a completely different sister show, earning a Daytime Emmy specifically for the second iteration of that journey. That's not a recast success story the way we discussed with Billy Flynn a couple episodes back, taking over someone else's established role and making it his own. This is something struck truly rare. A single actor's uninterrupted stewardship of one character across two entire fictional universes. Sally Spectra as a character might be the single best positioned figure we've covered in this entire series for genuine, meaningful cross-show storytelling precisely because her core identity trait, the capacity to reinvent herself when circumstances demand it, mirrors her actual literal narrative history, of successfully reinventing her place in an entirely new city. My honest, unhedged read on where this needs to go. The show should absolutely take Hope's own genuine enthusiasm seriously and actually explore that Lo's Angel's connection at some point. Not as a quick, disposable nostalgia stunt, but as a genuine, substantial storyline that lets Sally's unfinished business actually get addressed with real narrative weight,